Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, a show brought to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Keely, joined by Shotgun Spratling in studio and remotely, Ryan Abraham. He was traveling, so we're keeping him quarantined, but we have the whole crew here today. Wrong way, Ryan. We have a lot to talk about. We have an update on USC's search for its next tight ends coach. We got news of that on Friday night. An interesting time to drop some news, but we got that news nonetheless. We'll talk about USC hitting the NCAA transfer portal once again. They picked up a running back, so we'll talk about that. And believe it or not, signing day, the real one, quote unquote, not sure what you want to call this one anymore, which is sad, is on Wednesday. So we'll give a preview of that. We're actually not doing calls today, so sorry about that. You can also tweet at us, #TunnelVision. I'll put your tweet up on the screen. And I believe we're live on all three platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. Ryan's not monitoring you guys today, Periscope. I'm taking over, so I'll do my best to make sure your voice is heard on the show. But we'll be monitoring what you guys say, so be sure to send in your questions. We love talking to you guys. But guys, like I said, the news never stops with USC. The offseason always has news. Let's first start with Seth Doege. That's the crazy part. I learned last week that it's Doege, not Doge, like the meme. So there's at least that, a PSA for everyone wanting to learn USC's new tight ends coach name. Shotgun, first off with you, what were your initial thoughts when you heard this news?
Not surprising. It's very similar to the move they made last year, bringing up John David Baker from, an internal position on the staff, the support staff as a quality control assistant, moving him up to a full-time position coach. Doege is similar. He has a background with the air raid. He's worked with Mike Jinks before. He was on the staff at Bowling Green with him. And, he's worked with Graham Harrell in this offense the last couple of years. So not surprising that they made that move. They tried to do some other things, ended up falling back to the same thing, reverted back to what they did last year, which was just hiring someone from within.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, what were your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was today years old when I found out his name was Doege and not Doge. You look at him like, oh, Doge. It just seemed like it made sense. Similar to what Shotgun was saying, kind of what we saw last year when John David Baker was hired. It's definitely someone that knows the system better. And I think what Graham Harrell and Clay Helton wanted to do was make sure that the offensive staff, they all were, most everyone was familiar with these kind of air raid concepts. And I think Doege is definitely one of those guys. And I feel like you're going to try to get, there was going to be, I think maybe a narrow window of who you could hire for the position too, because there is a lot of uncertainty with the head coach, Clay Helton. We've covered that a couple of times before. And so I think it's not always easy to kind of fill out the staff exactly the way you want it. But there was a case where you could get someone that had some, maybe a little bit more experience, but you felt comfortable with the guy you had in-house. And I feel like they felt comfortable with Seth Doege. And so it wasn't going to be looked at as a poor hire or anything if they got him. But if they could have got someone else, I think there was a couple opportunities to do that. But, about what we would expect. And, we'll see what kind of a role the tight end / inside receivers will play in the offense this year.
Yeah, Shotgun, Ryan alluded to it, but USC did try to go after Arizona State's wide receivers coach, Prentice Gill. What did you hear on that situation? I know we reported some of that on the Peristyle this week.
Yeah, the Trojans made a good push after Gill, but inevitably he ends up staying with Arizona State, and Herm Edwards who gave him his first, full-time position. Former USC, support staff member and quality control, I believe. He was grad assistant with USC, and then he went to Oregon and was a quality control up there, assistant with their offense, working with their receivers, but known for his recruiting chops. And that was one of the things that USC was really trying to go after with Prentice Gill. He's got a lot of connections in Southern California. He's brought in LV Bunkley Shelton, a 4-star, Johnny Wilson, a 4-star. He helped out with Isaiah Johnson, a 4-star cornerback that Arizona State has committed as well. So, he's done a good job in his limited time there of doing a good job recruiting. So that was something that was attractive to USC. They went out and tried to get him, and they sounded like they had a better offer on the table, but it's the difference between having your own room as a receivers coach and maybe being a tight ends coach and kind of dual combining with Kerry Colbert to be the receivers coach there. So it was a little bit different kind of title, and I think that was part of the reason why he decided to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, two things, Keely. I think it's really important that, when you've seen the new administration kind of build out the support staff around the football program, part of the importance of that is if you do have to promote from within, you're going to have a good pool of people to do that. And they've done that 2 years in a row, not just because it's convenient, but because you actually have people that are capable. And, the fact that John David Baker gets hired away by Lane Kiffin after just 1 year as a full-time coach, that's someone that was on USC support staff was a higher quality person, candidate for other positions. And I feel like that's important that they actually have some, good people in the pipeline that they can build into coaches. Sometimes they'll get hired away from another program, or sometimes you can promote them from within.
Mm-hmm. And Doege served under Mike Jinks at Bowling Green, so there is some familiarity and chemistry with the staff. And I know fit was a thing in their search for the next offensive lineman. How much do you think just having familiarity with Jinks and the guys after being a quality control analyst at USC for 2 years, how much does that help him in this transition to an assistant coach role?
I mean, the big thing with the offensive line was the fit and just the communication, being able to speak the same language. Well, obviously, Doege's going to be able to speak the same language as Mike Jinks and Graham Harrell and Kerry Colbert, having been on the same staff with them for the last 2 years. So I think it's important in that regard, and trying to get this offense to take that next step forward, and that starts with running the ball. And that includes the tight ends. That's been a position where they've struggled to block. They have not done a good job the last couple of years blocking at the tight end position. And it's an important part for Graham Harrell. I've asked him how important, why do you keep the tight end in, basically? And he said, it's an important thing for us to have, to be able to use him as a blocker, but then, to go hurry up and be able to split a guy out as a tight end or, as a receiver, split him out that way and be able to use him in a variety of ways. So the position is important in Graham Harrell's offense, and it's important for him to have it out there on the field, but they've got to do better. They got to block. They got to contribute more. And that's something we got to see from that position going forward.
Yeah, Ryan, you got to talk to Graham Harrell this week, actually. What are you expecting from what he told you from USC's tight ends in 2021? Yeah,
it was interesting. Make sure you check out the interview. I did a podcast with Graham Harrell. We got to talk for about half hour or so, and it was interesting. We could cover a lot of different topics. It feels like the general theme was, they have to go back and look at stuff and figure out what they can do better. And I think we didn't get in a ton of detail about utilizing tight ends, and I really did want to ask him about, we didn't know who was going to get hired for that position, if it was going to be more of an inside receivers role or a tight end role. Are they just calling it? I mean, I'm not sure. Usually for this offense, we've talked about this before, you have an inside receivers coach. Is it going to essentially be that, or is it going to really be more of a tight end? They brought in a couple of tight ends in this class, so I don't think you can, abandon the position. But it'll be interesting to see how they utilize it going forward. I know a lot of fans are kind of upset. Well, they don't really use the tight ends at all. But I think taking that next step, hoping to get the running game going again, having the right splits for the offensive line, maybe that opens up some holes for guys, and working closer with the tight ends and having the blocking schemes to go with it, more of an air raid type of feel. I think there's a lot of hope around USC that they're going to see improvement from that position.
In Clay Helton's statement when they released the news about Doege, Clay talked about how he's a good recruiter. He was helpful, and we know he helped in the recruitment of Miller Moss and Jackson Dart. How much does that help when you promote a guy who's good at fostering relationships, as Clay Helton said, to a bigger role on the staff?
I mean, it helps to already have some relationships built with the guys that are coming in.
Yeah.
He's taking over a position where you're bringing in Michael Trigg, you're bringing in Lake McCree. Can you get those guys to be instant impact guys? It helps that he's already probably got a relationship with those guys to begin with from when they've been on their official visits and come to campus and different things. So it'll be interesting to see who he's recruiting in that spot, because he was recruiting the quarterbacks, and a lot of times when he was on the sideline, he was talking to Keaton, Slovis. He was talking with the receivers. He was kind of a go in between different positions. So what kind of role do they have for him on field, but also who exactly is he recruiting? Is it just tight ends, or is he going to help out recruiting in some other spots as well?
Mm-hmm. Ryan, I know you already touched on this a little bit, but you have been a fierce critic of promoting from within, but it sounds like you think that this is different in that sense.
I think it's about the way USC did it. It was just sort of like, if it was a familiar, hire, where you're just like, hey, we know him, let's hire. Like, there are some good things about hiring someone that and Shotgun touched on it. You recruited some of these players that are in this class. They're familiar with you. The technology, the terminology, and all of that. Those are all good reasons to promote from within if you have a good candidate. The problem is, I think what USC was doing before was just promoting from within because it's someone that knew what they were doing, and it wasn't necessarily the best, the best possible position coach that you could find out there. And I feel like they've had a pretty good mix of getting someone from, promoting from within when you feel it was warranted, and then going outside and finding someone else that has an area of expertise that's similar to what you want, but you learned it somewhere else. So I feel like it's a better mix now. It's one of those things where you just say, hey, never hire anyone that knows the fight song. It's just because that's all they did. So it's not like it's bad if you hire a coach that went to USC at some point, but when you keep doing it over and over and over again, you kind of get your hand slapped and say, no more of that. So I'm okay with the promotion from within in the right spots. I feel like they've done a pretty good job of that the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Shotgun, you look like you want to add on to that.
I mean, they've been able to build the support staff out, so you have more options for one, but you're going out and actually trying to attract you're trying to attract support staff that may be able to fill that next role for you versus just having a couple of guys that are your recruiting guys and nothing else. Bringing in a guy like Chris Claiborne last year is a guy who obviously had coaching acumen. He's been a head coach. He's a guy that wants to take that next step and be a college coach. Now he ends up on the Arizona State staff, but he's a guy that you could have looked at depending on where you had a vacancy on your staff, because he's a guy who has coaching experience before, instead of some of the guys that have previously been on the staff who were just, Eric Ziskin and those type guys who were just strictly recruiting guys. Those aren't guys you're going to promote from within.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, I mean, that's a good point from Shotgun. Is it okay for USC to promote from within? Well, other schools are trying to take your support staff people. They weren't doing that before. So you build out a good support staff. There are people that are capable of becoming assistant coach at other places, and it's okay for you to hire them as well. So the fact that other programs are taking away some of the support staff for USC is a good sign that you've put the right people in place that are people that could potentially be assistant coaches, head coaches down the road.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Ryan, because Shotgun and I talked about it on the latest Family Feud, but fans were very dramatic about Chris Claiborne leaving, and I understand given his significance to the university, but this is kind of what happens with support staff hires and how they get hired away.
For sure, and I mean, if you want to do like Shotgun analogies where you make like a big blockbuster trade, like if you're trading like Clayton Kershaw and you're sending these prospects, like, well, these are the unproven guys, right? And I feel like the support staff a lot of times are unproven guys. Chris Claiborne was a high school, head coach in high school, but USC didn't give him a spot, coaching the linebackers. And I don't have an issue with that because he really didn't have any college experience doing that. So I feel like you built it up the right way. Now, maybe a year or two down the road, USC would have promoted Chris Claiborne and he would have been a linebacker coach for USC or something down there. Who knows? But someone else, they hired someone that was good. He works in college, kind of learns the college game, and then other programs are like, hey, I want to hire that guy. And there's reasons you want to hire him. Like if you're Arizona State, you're still trying to hammer Southern California and recruit hard in Southern California. They've made great assistant coach hires to help them do that. And I think Chris Claiborne is just another example of that. Antonio Pierce or Chris Hawkins, like all those guys, but it just wasn't the right time for USC. So I wouldn't take a knock at USC because they didn't hire Chris Claiborne, but they brought him in and gave him that opportunity to get into college, and now he is. And who knows, maybe he gets a couple of years seasoning as a linebacker coach at Arizona State, USC hires him back in a few years. I mean, it's just how it works. But they found the right guy, gave him a start, and I think that's what you have to do when you're building out a support staff. You're finding these people that are potential coaches down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ideally, if you're a blue blood program, if you're the elite program in a conference, then that's what you want. You bring in some guys that are support staff, they're your alumni, that they're going to be support staff. They're going to help out, they're going to see the way you do things, and then they get hired away somewhere else, and they get groomed as a full-time coach elsewhere, and then if they're really good, then you bring them back on. That's what you want as a blue blood. That's, look at what Alabama has done, just repetitively under Nick Saban, where he brings coaches in. They're, Steve Sarkisian is a quality control assistant, working with the offense. Same thing with Butch Davis and all those other former head coaches that come in as analysts and stuff for them. And then if they have an opening, hey, maybe we'll hire with them, we'll push. Or, if it's a young guy that, is kind of cutting his teeth, then maybe he goes out and he gets a job at a different SEC school. And if he does really well, then that, when they have that next opening, that's when Nick Saban brings him back in and said, this is a guy that we've groomed previously and we've seen what he can do as a full-time position. That's what blue bloods do, and that's what USC is doing a little bit better now, rather than saying, we'll take the guy that's unproven and we'll make him good from our school. No, if you're the blue blood, you should be able to have other people do your grooming for you.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to move on to the news of the week as far as NCAA transfer portal. USC went back to Texas, picking up a running back this time, Keaontay Ingram. Ryan, something we talked about is how does USC attract a running back to the school, given, what we've seen from the running back position? What do you think of this pickup that USC got?
Yeah, Gabe Brooks does a great job covering Texas recruiting, and he came on our site and posted an article that gave a lot of information about it. So if you got to go check it out on USCFootball.com, it's one of those things where it feels like you have a talented running back that maybe wasn't in the right position for him. It looked pretty good. I think he had 10 touchdowns his sophomore year, and then had an injury and things kind of fell off his junior year. I think there was a fumble or two that were kind of costly and sort of. And then Bijan Robinson ended up, taking things over. It just seemed like you had a really talented tailback, maybe wasn't in the right position, probably put on a little too much weight. I think he got up to 230 pounds at one point. Similar to what, with Marquis Stepp. I think Marquis Stepp's a great running back. It's just the situation at USC wasn't the right fit at the time, whatever reason. I think that you're going to see a similar kind of thing, at Texas. And will he be able to come over and, plug in and he's got the potential to come in and be a starter for USC for sure. I mean, he can come in and get a lot of playing time. And it was one of those things where he did run a bunch of those spread concepts when he was in high school and had those kind of wide splits, and it seemed to work out pretty well. And he wasn't really doing that same thing at Texas. So USC's offense might be a better fit for what we saw when he was in high school, the kind of stuff that that he was able to do, and ran track and all this kind of stuff. So there's speed there. 6'1". I think Gabe was thinking he should probably play around 210 or so. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what weight he comes in at and where they want to play him at. But they needed to get a running back out of the transfer portal, and you get a guy like that's got success in college. You're a super talented kid coming out of high school. That's pretty good for USC, because like you said, Keely, it wasn't going to be easy to find a guy when you're last in rushing in the Pac-12, but you still got those Heismans in Heritage Hall. There's still some stuff you can sell to these running backs. So it'll be interesting to see how they use them and then how this running game progresses going forward, because you can't have the kind of year that you had in 2020 and under 100 rushing yards a game.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting as far as the weight goes, Ryan. Obviously, when Mike Jinks got to USC, he said, "I've never had any running backs this big." So maybe Keaontay Ingram, dropped some weight, and that's what they're looking for. Mike Jinks, a guy that plays it, between 200 and 210, rather than a guy that's at 220 to 230, where he's had Stephen Carr and Vi and Marquis Stepp before him. So maybe that fits better for him, and that's something you could sell. It's like, hey, we want you to drop down the weight that you were. We saw what you can do at this weight. We think you're going to excel here. This is the way we see it. So it's selling those type of things. It's selling, hey, this is the type of offense where we think you'll excel. It's also the relationships. Having that connection from, having a couple of Texas coaches on the staff, that obviously does not hurt them there, to be able to build that connection, and having all the Texas inroads that USC has on the offensive side, from John David Baker when he was on staff still, with Graham Harrell and with Mike Jinks, and having those guys all have, and even Clay Helton, all of them have Texas background. So when it comes to talking to your high school coach, your trainer, and all those type things when you're looking in the transfer portal. I think all those played into Keaontay Ingram potentially, with him coming into USC.
Mm-hmm. And Shotgun, you also talked about how it was a benefit for USC based on where he slots in eligibility-wise in the depth roster as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the fact that he still has, he has multiple years of eligibility, he basically is taking over the spot as far as your scholarship chart for Marquise Stepp, just as far as, because if USC, they've been trying to bring in 2 running backs. Well, if you bring in 2 running backs in this class, or even if you bring in 3 running backs in this class, and then you have Stephen Carr and Vi leave, well, now if you're one of those guys and you don't get carries immediately, are you looking at it and going, okay, well, I'm 4th or I'm 5th or on the depth chart, I'm going to hit the transfer portal because I'm stuck in the same class as these other guys. I'm never going to pass over them. So this creates that separation of classes that you're looking for. You want to basically take a running back every class. You want to take a quarterback every class. And this puts USC back on track a little bit better by getting a guy who's a redshirt sophomore after this season.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ryan, I know you can't necessarily make up for what you lose in Marquise Stepp, but how does USC maybe get power back into its running back depth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure power is really going to come into play as much. I mean, I feel like they're not going to get under center. They're not going to, they're not going to like power through things at 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. They would hand it to Stepp, and he could do that. I'm not sure you want Ingram to be that kind of guy. I really want him to be more of a fit in the overall scheme where he can catch the balls out of the backfield. They want to, utilize him in that role, and kind of run through the zone blocking scheme, some of those wider splits. He just seemed to have a real knack for that when he was in high school. So I don't necessarily want to replace him and make him like some kind of power guy or anything. I'm just not sure that's what they're going to run. But you want to have effective schemes on short yardage situations. If you're not going to go under center, I think they need to spread it out a little bit more, and I think that's what we're going to see going forward. But I wouldn't look at him as some guy that's going to come in and run a bunch of power plays. I think it's just going to be more about he's more of an air raid kind of scheme, running back from a scheme point of view. And how does that elevate USC's running game in 2021?
And that's something that Shotgun and I actually talked about, is that I think part of the reason why Marquise Stepp was a fan favorite was the fact that he was so powerful he could make opportunities for himself, whereas USC's scheme didn't really allow that for other backs. Shotgun, you can take it away because I know you have some thoughts on this.
Well, just maybe now we'll see they'll stop trying to do that type of stuff. Stop trying to bunch up the offensive line to get a 3rd and 1. Just run your stuff that you normally would run. And, USC, it's not a goal line package. It's not a short yardage package. But you would see they would very frequently, when they needed a 3rd and 1, after they pick up a 9-yard gain, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to hurry up, and then they're going to squeeze in the tights, their splits, and then try to run it, and pick up 1 yard. And they would leave somebody off the edge. And if if they weren't able to pick up 1 yard, they were often hitting the backfield. So maybe they'll run their normal stuff, be able to attack the edges, attack with the zones, the outside zone scheme and stuff like that. And, you can mix things in and do some different things, but it was something where it worked occasionally, but teams just caught on, like, okay, when they hurry up to the line and they're going to run something and it's going to be, an immediate run right up the middle, basically. Well, if you know what's coming, you can pretty much stop it in football. That's kind of the way things work. So you need to have what's going to be the option off that. What really frustrates is watching the offense is like you can run that stuff, but then you also need to play action, throw at the tight end. There's opportunities that were there that they just didn't take advantage of. It didn't seem like there were different things you could do with jet motions and different things on those 3rd and 1 situations, even if you're not going under center. So if you're not going to do that, then don't run basically the same exact play every time, which is kind of what they were doing. It was a high prevalency of running the same thing over and over.
Ryan, I know you talked to Graham Harrell about the run game. What do you have to say?
Yeah, no, well, I agree with what Shotgun's saying, is because if you're going to say we don't go under center, well, then you have to have other options where you're in shotgun, you're in pistol, you're looking around, and it's like, okay, the box is stacked. We're supposed to hand it off, just sideways handoff to Marquise Stepp. But there's off coverage on my slot guy. I can just, I can pick up 3rd and 1 really quickly that way. Or the running back swings out, or you fake it one way and you dump it off there and you're picking up yardage that way. So you don't always have to just line up in your kind of passing formation and run out of it. And it seems like that's what USC was doing. For what Graham Harrell was saying, like, I don't know if it was the greatest answers in the world. It was just really talking about, what they do well. Look at everything as far as like, was it personnel problems? Was it scheme problems? Was it execution problems? And it seems like there's still going to be a lot of tape watching to kind of figure out, exactly what they were doing. I'm guessing there was been such, it's been hit negatively, in the media and fans and everything. I don't think they can allow that to happen again, where you're last in the Pac-12. It's going to be, hopefully it's going to be more of a normal year. And if you remember, I don't know if it was Shotgun that asked, Graham Harrell about the lack of running game. I think it was Washington State game where they ran for 5 yards, and his answer was, well, Keaton Slovis completed 17 straight passes like to end the half. Sorry if that was the wrong game. And that's true. I mean, when the passing offense is working, it's fine, but you still have to be able to run the football effectively. And there was just too many games where they weren't effective doing that. And I feel like that's going to be one of those sticking points in this offseason, Keely. They're going to have to address it one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every once in a while you're going to throw a ball, wide receiver drops it, second down, you throw a ball and you pick up 9 yards. Guess what? It's 3rd and 1. You've thrown the ball 2 times successfully. The wide receiver dropped one. However, what are you going to do on 3rd down? Can you not run the ball so you have to throw the ball every time? No, you need to be able to run the ball. You get down on the goal line, you need to be able to run the ball. You don't have to run the ball for 200 yards a game, but you need to be successful when you attempt to run the ball. You don't have to run it 40, 50, 60 times a game, but be successful in the 20 to 30 that you're going to run the ball. That's the biggest difference, is that when they would attempt to run the ball, they weren't being successful after the first 2 games last season.
Mm-hmm. Since we're on the topic of the transfer portal, we've gotten multiple questions about this on both YouTube and Facebook, so I'm just going to bring it up right now, even though we talked about it last week. USC did pick up Keaton Nixon from Colorado. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. Ryan, what is USC getting in Colorado's receiver?
Yeah, I mean, he's a playmaker guy. I mean, he can make dudes miss. You see him, he's someone that you could use all over the field. He returns kicks. So, could he be that jack of all trades, like a Dory Jackson kind of guy, but on the offensive side of the ball? I mean, he just did a lot for Colorado. And when he was teamed up with Laviska Shenault, man, that was a deadly duo. So, he's going to have some really good receivers to kind of pair up with at USC. And I feel like there's going to be, just a lot of options for someone like that, where you could, he could do a jet sweep or catch something out of the backfield, line up in the backfield and catch a little swing pass or go deep or whatever it is. I mean, he just seems to be good at all that stuff. He's kind of a gadget guy and can do a lot of things on the field. So I think there's just a lot of options for Graham Harrell to be able to use a guy like that. They got, it's not the greatest receiver depth, but obviously at the top end talent is tremendous. And having a guy like Keaton Nixon, a proven college football player coming in, I think, you got a Brew McCoy who's done some stuff. You got a Kyle Ford you think is going to do amazing things, but Keaton Nixon is a guy that's actually done it. So you know what you have in that. And then you have all this upside from some of the younger guys coming in as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing with Keaton Nixon, you talk about all those things you can do with him. Are they going to do any of that stuff with him? I mean, that's the big question. I mean, you can do a lot of things with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they did occasionally. They did, especially last year when they lost the running backs. They got more creative, and they used him in a bunch of different ways. I chart all the plays, and I had to make a lot of new notes on my spreadsheet and stuff for where he was at and using him in different motions and whatnot. But that was the rarity. That wasn't the norm. So are they going to do that with Keaton Nixon? Are you going to use him for jet sweeps and fly motions? Are you going to do those type things? There's a lot of things you can do. You can do the same things with Gary Bryant. You can do some unique things with Drake London, but how often are they actually doing those things? That's a big question. A lot of times they're not taking advantage of those matchups, and they're just saying our offense will work. There'll be somebody open every time if we just run the offense right, instead of, hey, let me create a mismatch that's going to really exploit the defense. They're just saying, hey, we'll run to grass and we'll find there'll be somebody open, and as long as the quarterbacks go through his progressions, progressions are golden. They say that all the time. As long as he goes through or reads are golden, I think it is. So as long as he goes through his progressions and makes the right reads, then they're going to pick up yards every time. But how often are they saying, ooh, as a freshman cornerback over there, let's see what we can do to exploit him? Now, they do it occasionally. You saw it with I think it was a Tyler Vaughn's touchdown, I want to say against UCLA, where they ran a double move. They said, hey, we've been saving that one, and we ran it. But it seems like there's a handful of plays at best every week for that, and then we're going to run our regular offense all the time. So you get 3 or 4 plays, you're like, all right, we hope these really hit. And if they don't, it might be that toss sweep to Gary Bryant Jr. that failed miserably. But the rest of the time is just going to run the regular stuff. So did you see somebody like Gary Bryant check in for a couple of plays and you go, man, I wish they'd try to find a way to get get the ball in this guy's hands because he's special when he does. So are they going to do that with Keaton Nixon? That's a big question for me.
We actually got a question from Jasper Smith about it. He says, does transfer portal wide receiver Keaton Nixon take reps away from guys like Kyle Ford, Gary Bryant, and even Josh Jackson?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, yeah. Anytime you bring in someone new. Yeah. But USC finished the season with 5 returning wide receivers that were healthy. And one of them was playing defense at the end of the year. So USC actually just lost a player at the wide receiver position, which if you read the war room, it's in there. So you guys better sign up to find out who they're losing there. But so their depth continues to slim down at the wide receiver position. They don't have that many bodies. They have great, like Ryan said, they have great talent, top-end talent, and even bringing in the 3 wide receivers that are coming in with the freshman class, they're going to add some depth too and might be, called on immediately. But there's not a bunch of bodies. So if you have a couple more injuries like they've had in the last couple of years, you could be in trouble there again. So I'm not really worried about stealing reps from some of the younger guys.
Yeah. And real quick, Shotgun mentioned that I should have mentioned at the top of the show. We are doing a 60% off sale. So if you're not a VIP member, to USCfootball.com. You can read the war room. There's a lot of juicy nuggets in the war room this past week on Friday. But yeah, so if you're not a member, you can join now, 60% off. It's a crazy deal, so they're doing it for this pre-signing day stuff. So make sure you check it out. You want to get involved in USC football, know what's going on all the time. Go to the water cooler and tell your friends all about what's going on. You will know when you get your subscriber to USCfootball.com.
The virtual water cooler, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess we can't do that anymore. But
yeah. So I asked our Gerard Martinez, who is our recruiting analyst, what he considers Wednesday these days, and he said an afterthought, just because the early signing period kind of takes away the excitement of National Signing Day, if you will. What are you guys expecting for USC on Wednesday?
I mean, it really comes down to one player. It's Rajon Davis. It's boom or bust for them as far as Wednesday goes, just because he's the one big target they still have on their board. Now, they're also in the mix for Austin Uke, the offensive lineman from Texas. And sure, they could use more offensive line talent. That's obvious. But Rajon Davis is a potential difference maker on the defensive side, and a guy who decommitted from LSU. USC has been in the his top couple of schools at least. He did take a visit to Ohio State recently. So there's some thought that maybe the Buckeyes are creeping in, whereas USC was the leader, coming off the decommitment from LSU. So we'll see. He's going to make his announcement on 24/7 Sports is live show on Wednesday. So make sure you guys are tuning into that to see if he does pick USC. There's another really, really big target out there. JT Tuimoloau, the defensive tackle from Eastside Catholic and outside of Seattle. However, he's the number one recruit overall in the 24/7 Sports rankings. So you could potentially pair him with the number one composite ranked player in Corey Foreman if you're USC, but he is not going to make his decision right now. He's going to wait. He really wants to take visits to schools. He didn't get a chance to do that, one, because he's a basketball player, so he's also super athletic. I've seen him play tight end and just dominate people. So he's really, really good. If you haven't seen his highlights, you should check those out. But because of his basketball, he did not take a lot of visits like a lot of other kids did. So then when the whole process was shut down, he has not been able to see a lot of the schools that he wants to look at. So he wants to wait until probably April when the NCAA is going to open up. The dead period is finally going to be pulled back. So he wants to go take his visits and be able to check out the campuses and stuff and then make a decision after that.
Mm-hmm. And as far as Austin Uke, I switch it each time I say it. What are you expecting from him, Shotgun?
I mean, he's an offensive lineman, again, that when USC offered him, he was committed to Holy Cross. So he's really blown up, and that's one of the reasons why he didn't sign in December. He wanted to wait and see how the process played out and see who had spots left. And he's got a ton of offers from across the country. I haven't seen any updates on him recently, but that's another guy that USC's in the mix for. They were one of the first big schools to offer him. So they're a school that could potentially bring in another offensive lineman there.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ryan, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, just quick on Rajon Davis, the hashtag take back the West and all that. Too many of the local, highly ranked players were going to the SEC or they're going to Clemson, places like that. So to get there's some turmoil obviously at LSU after they won the championship. To get a guy that was committed to LSU and is a local guy from a feeder high school that, typically guys go to USC, and to be able to land him in a position of need, it's a big deal. So, it's not a lot of players that are going to be on this afterthought signing day, the Wednesday signing day, but that's a big one if USC is able to get Rajon Davis.
That's what I was going to ask you, Ryan. You've been covering recruiting for a long time. How have you seen just it evolve with this early signing period? This day on Wednesday, it just is different.
It's different. I hate it. I thought with the pandemic that we might get, push it off to the regular signing day. I just like the timing better. There's so much going on. It's like you're putting Christmas is great, but let's add Thanksgiving and Halloween right before it too, and just you have all this stuff going on. So there's the getting ready for bowl games and the championship and all the conference championships and all that. And while you're preparing for all this stuff, you have to sign most 80-90% of your recruiting class right before the holidays and finals, and just everything's going on at once. I don't mind an early signing period, but having it basically a month and a half before the regular one, it became the de facto signing period. I would rather see them, if you're that quarterback that's been committed for a year and a half and you want to sign in July or something, that's cool. It's not a lot going on there. You'll get some players that are just this is the school I want to go to. I'm going to sign early and be done with it. Then everyone else wait till after the season, wait till after the bowl games, wait after the coaching carousel happens, and sign in February. So I think it would work better that way. Hopefully we get to that at some point, but they sort of shoehorned this early signing period right in the the middle of everything, all this action, especially this year with the pandemic, it was even worse. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it.
Yeah, and it's like 6 weeks difference. So how much difference is it really making 6 weeks? Like Ryan said, I would be much more in favor of an actual early signing period before players' senior year, whether that be in August or whatever, but before their senior year of football. And then you have National Signing Day in February. It's unfortunate for I guess us and the recruiting services and all that type of stuff, because it takes away a big off-season date. It's kind of like a national holiday for people before. Some people were calling into work so they could watch and see who's signing on the day. That's when you have all the commitments and stuff. You have all the nationally televised commitments. So it made for a fun, interesting day. But now, this season in particular, it was really rough just because for USC, it was in the midst of back-to-back short weeks for them. They're playing Oregon in the championship game while also trying to close this class, and give them credit for doing a really good job and getting a guy like Jackson Dart to make his commitment on signing day to USC. But you're trying to close out this class, and they also got Corey Foreman to sign that day, even though it wasn't revealed until a couple weeks later. But you're trying to do all that while you just played a couple of days earlier against UCLA on a short week. Now you've got one less day to prepare for Oregon. You're trying to close out this class.
But they didn't know, too. They didn't know that they were playing Oregon, so that was another factor.
As well. So you're bouncing about who you're going to play that week. Yeah. It was just hectic. And then, like Ryan said, there's other schools that are preparing for bowl games and stuff. So it's not a great time in the college football calendar for it to be happening.
Yeah.
Now, part of the reason why I think they do is because there's also a December signing period for other sports. So maybe that's why they decided that December was a good time. But it's an awkward time to have it as far as the college football schedule. It works out for players, for high school players a lot of times because they're finished up with their high school semesters, I guess. But, again, I think ideally you would have an early signing period prior to the season for the guys that know the school they want to go to. There's not going to be any change of heart type of thing. And then you have one in February.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing players like Corey Foreman did. You're having these all-star games 2 weeks later where people are usually make their announcements. So they're signing and then keeping it hush-hush. And so Clay Helton didn't even tell his whole staff that Corey Foreman had signed. That stuff just weird. You don't need to be doing that kind of stuff. Just have an early signing period, July, August, something like that. All those guys that want to sign early can. There'll be a handful of dudes, and then everyone else signs in February. I think it would be much better for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Now, Shotgun, you started a new podcast. There was some love for you in the chat about your new podcast. Our buddy Stephen Poway dropped some love for you. And because you started the new podcast called Heard It, you had basketball on. I'm giving you a basketball minute. Is there anything you would like to update? Because there are some people on YouTube who really want to talk about basketball. Sorry, Ryan.
This is a big week for USC basketball. They just had this weekend off because Oregon was unable to play. Oregon had to shut down and pause all their team activities for 2 weeks, basically. So USC did not play them. They played on Thursday. They beat Oregon State, got a little redemption there after losing to them the week before. But this week upcoming is really big for them. They go to Stanford on Tuesday, another schedule change. There were like 3 schedule changes this past week. Oregon dropping out. Stanford game was supposed to be a home game. Now it's going to be a road game. They go up to Stanford. Stanford's played really well recently, even though they've been without 3 starters. They beat UCLA in overtime. They won at Arizona before struggling against Arizona State. But big game there for USC. And then USC hosts UCLA next Saturday. So it's going to be a primetime game, 7 p.m. USC has an opportunity to take a step forward this week in the Pac-12 standings. They're currently, I believe, a game and a half out from UCLA, maybe. I think it's a game and a half still, but they have 2 games left with UCLA, so a great opportunity to move up the rankings and try to win a Pac-12 championship.
That reminds me that one of the last real life things I did before quarantine was the UCLA USC basketball game.
Last thing you did?
Maybe. Yeah. Yes.
One practice of spring after instant analysis from USC UCLA. The finale last year, the USC won on a buzzer beater from Jonah Matthews. Big dramatic win for USC at the Galen Center. We'll see how it plays out this year. Both teams are really good. USC obviously has Evan Mobley in the middle. And if you didn't hear the podcast, you should check it out and just listen to what Chris Capco, the assistant coach, had him on for the podcast. Listen to what he says about Evan Mobley. He says he has the potential to be a Hall of Fame type player. Wow. So that's really, really high praise. And coaches generally don't give that type of high praise to their players.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's jump into questions. First one is from Edward on YouTube, who says, are there any offensive linemen looking to commit? He didn't specify when, so take free reign with that.
It's probably meaning signing day, yeah.
Sure.
I don't think there's anyone else on the radar, Shotgun, besides
Uke.
What's his name? Uke, yeah.
Yeah, Austin Uke is the one guy that USC is looking at in this class. Obviously, the transfer portal is an option, and we'll see what Clay McGuire does there, the new offensive line coach. Are you looking to bring somebody in the portal? How do you assess exactly who you have on your roster? Is that solely on Graham Harrell? And you say, hey, Graham, who do I got? And then and Graham Harrell tells him you need to go try to find somebody. I don't know exactly how you go about that. That'll be a kind of interesting conversation with him. Just how did you figure out whether or not you needed to go to the transfer portal to see if you can find somebody? There are some options in the transfer portal, and there's still a little bit of turnover there. There's been some big-time former 4- and 5-star guys go into the portal and have already picked up their new home, I guess, their transfer destination. So can USC find somebody that fits for their scheme and will fit in? That's a question. I think they're still going to be looking in the transfer portal for another offensive lineman with some experience to come in and build with that group. But also look towards 2022. USC is actually making some inroads with some 2022 offensive linemen. So, maybe you'll see, I don't know if you'll see any commitments soon, but USC looks like they're doing a little bit better job of that class as far as getting on the radar early with some of those guys.
Mm-hmm. Teresa on YouTube asks, what is the key reason for improved recruiting?
I mean, the same things I think we talk about all the time. You see that there's some stability. Clay Helton has stayed. The last off season there was a lot of question marks about that. There obviously weren't as many this season. Stability is one. You see the players getting better. You see progression. At specific defensive positions in particular. The defensive line had some guys that really took a step forward. The defensive backs played really well. So seeing that progression, that's what players are looking for. Are you going to make me better? And I think that, the personalities, you've got recruiting personalities, guys that are very friendly. Dante Williams obviously is the name that everyone will talk about, but also guys like Craig Nivar and Vic Soto have done a really good job and have really positive personalities that recruits seem to really be attracted to.
Ryan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say it's like effort. If we went another baseball reference, are you gonna try to beat out that ground ball to third base? You're gonna run your hardest down, and every once in a while you're gonna pick up that single. I feel like USC, the effort was way down, and it was sort of a confluence of things. A whole bunch of bad things happened at once. There's no way USC should be out of the top 20 in recruiting anytime, anywhere. Doesn't matter. To be 64th for that class was for the class of 2020, absolutely ridiculous. but it had to be kind of a perfect storm where you didn't have your T. Martins or Dante Williams on staff. You didn't have the ace recruiter there. You had a bunch of guys that maybe were part-time recruiters, and you were coming off a 5-7 season where people were down, and just everything sort of worked against USC, and all of those mistakes that you had made. Sometimes you make a mistake 2 years ago and it kind of is overshadowed by, well, you got this local guy that signs with you anyway. Sort of like all the basic advantages that USC had sort of were minimized for that class. And anything that was an issue was accentuated. And it just became this horrible class. And really just not screwing up, you're going to get significantly better than 64th. And to be in the top 10, you had to put in a bunch of effort. And I think a lot of it has to do with the coaches that they hired. There's just much more effort going into USC recruiting now than there was before. And don't sell, the support staff as well. They had guys, like the Gavin Morrises of the world, like working their tails off. They got a lot more people around them now, and they're getting better at supporting that staff. And you're seeing, better video and better content that is not maybe consumed by the likes of us, but are definitely consumed by 16, 17-year-old kids. They love that stuff. You're seeing all schools do it now. I saw University of Arizona just do a video with Teddy Bruschi, and he was out there, it was like a 2-minute promotion video of basically what like Arizona football was in the 90s. But that's what they're going to try to sell, right? And you might come join the staff or something too. But you're seeing these kind of productions everywhere. And USC just getting there, you had to kind of catch up. And I think USC's caught up in a lot of those areas. But to me, really is the effort. You have to put in the effort. And I think there really was a lack of it. After T. Martin left, you didn't have that kind of, you had some people that were okay at recruiting, but there wasn't that relentless, like your go-to guy. And maybe now, Dante's your go-to guy. But with losing T. Martin, they didn't really replace him with any kind of go-to guy. And you saw the classes take a huge dip when he was gone.
Mm-hmm. Shotgun?
Just to answer a couple of quick questions on recruiting. Ramon Ibarra asked if recruits are able to sign after Wednesday. When's the deadline for them to sign? There is no actual deadline. You can just show up to campus. Now, locking your spot in with a school, schools are going to push you to sign that letter of intent to make sure you're locked in so they know that you're going to show up. But there is no actual deadline as far as that goes. And Stabbers asked, is there a transfer portal signing deadline? Same thing. Katie Nixon didn't sign with USC. He just showed up to USC and enrolled in classes as far as the transfer goes. Now, you sign financial aid agreements and stuff like that, but as far as you don't re-sign a national letter of intent or anything like that. So it's a little bit different there as far as, when you transfer, but the same thing, there's no actual deadline for either one of those.
Yeah, for December, it's the signing period. So there's like 3 days you can sign, which is why Corey Foreman signs one of those 3 days and then doesn't say anything until he announces or whatever. But for the signing day, signing day is just the first day. It's not.
It's just the opening.
Yeah.
Yep. Jeff on Facebook wanted to know what it means for Vavae Malapaya and Stephen Carr now that USC is adding another back.
The big question is, Mike Jinks said in an interview with the LA Times that they are going to try to find a feature back and stick with them. So that's the big question. Do those guys think, hey, I can still beat this guy out? Then yeah. Then you stay. Then you go in. You say, okay, I'm going to be the feature back. Does it become the same thing? Otherwise, you're basically those guys they're living in the same thing they've lived in the last 3 years. It's basically like, okay, I'm going to be splitting carries with 2 other guys. Because USC is going to go 3 deep, and whichever the 3 that is, and they'll rotate those guys. So that's the big question there is, are they going to find an actual feature back, or are they going to use 2 guys? They're going to use 3 guys. That's what those guys have to worry about. But I think they should have confidence in themselves that, hey, I can beat out this other guy.
Eric on Facebook wanted to know, could there be any unexpected commits for USC on Wednesday?
I don't think you're going to see unexpected as far as 2021 class. I think we kind of know who it is. Just there's so few players that are left out there, to be honest, as far as top end guys. Because so many guys signed during the December period, and as we were talking about earlier, that's what it's basically neutered this signing day from being a national holiday anymore for college football fans. It's now just, hey, there's going to be a couple other guys. And there's significant pieces. A guy like Rajon Davis is a significant piece. However, you're signing one guy versus, a 15, 20-man class.
Mm-hmm. You're not really going to you're not going to take a flyer on some maybe lower ranked 3-star guy that you would take a shot because you could actually go to the transfer portal and get a proven guy. So there's even less likely to get a surprise on signing day.
Yeah, especially this year with just the amount of players that are in the transfer portal and the fact that, expect everyone's going to be able to play right away. So that's a completely different ball game for teams. A lot of coaches have actually said because of the transfer portal, because of the new rule, is that they're not going to kind of reach on a guy that maybe a project guy, maybe we think we can make him a better player when he gets to campus. We'll wait and see how he does if he goes to a JUCO or goes to another school, and then if we can talk him into transfer, and then maybe we'll get him in a couple of years after he's developed, rather than having to spend a couple of years of scholarship on him when we can go in the transfer portal and get somebody else right away.
Mm-hmm. Jumping back to running backs, Leonard on YouTube wanted to know who would we pick next season for starting running back for USC?
I mean, Vi is the guy that does everything for them.
Yeah.
And he's the guy that took over at the end of the season. But when you bring Keaontay Ingram in, and if he fits in the system best, that's something you got to really keep your eye on, because the other running backs were all on the roster already, and that was the thing with Jinx. These guys are all bigger than I expected. I've never had anybody this big. That means they don't fit the system the way it normally would work. So does Keaontay Ingram do that? Maybe he shoots up the rankings and takes over at the top of the depth chart.
Yeah, I think probably the leader in the clubhouse would be Vi, just because Jinx seems to really like him. He was when they couldn't run the ball, he had the 100-yard game and no one else could do anything. I feel like he's going to be the leader in the clubhouse, but when Ingram comes in, what does spring practice look like, or what does fall camp look like? And wow, is he a great fit for that? The problem is if he does just stand out and they're like, man, he's the clear starter. I mean, I don't know what Carr and Vi do at that point. I mean, that would be disastrous if one or both of those decided to transfer out, because then you're just not going to have any depth behind Ingram there. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But I think until he's beaten out, I think it's going to be Vi that's probably going to be the starter.
Yeah, I would have to agree.
Also, remember at least that Keaontay Ingram, one of the things that lost him the starting job at Texas this year, besides the fact that Bijan Robinson is really good, and that's why USC tried really hard to get him, is that he fumbled the ball down near the goal line a couple times. So you got to take care of the football. So if he has some fumble issues, that could drop him down the depth chart as well.
Mm-hmm. Mark on YouTube wanted to know who decides who starts at each position group, Helton or the position coaches. Could we see a lot of changes along the offensive line if Clay McGuire is actually the one who gets to decide?
It's usually the position coaches, from what I've been told. But I mean, the head coach is the head coach. If this guy wants to start, then he wants that guy to start. I mean, I think he can be involved in all of those decisions, but you're going to rely on your assistant coaches and say, here, if there's some master plan and they want, this guy to start for whatever position for whatever reason, then it's going to be the head coach's call. But for the most part, the assistant coaches are doing they're putting out their depth chart of who's winning what and who's going to be starting.
Mm-hmm. And when a new coach comes in, there's going to be a new evaluation. So that's why you might see a shakeup in that sense. But I thought it was interesting. Mark didn't ask this, but we got an insight from Todd Orlando this season about how they, on the defensive side of the ball, pick who's starting. Shotgun, do you remember that conversation we had with him?
I do not.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, basically they rank players. And then each week they say who's based on who's practicing each week.
Yeah, the Vic Soto will come in and say he'll rank out each of the defensive linemen, and then they'll go around the room basically and discuss, why that person is ranked there, and whether they need to change that ranking, and that kind of determines your playing time going into Saturday. And with Vic Soto in particular, the rankings changed frequently. There were different guys that played each week that maybe you didn't see them later in the season. So every position is not like that. Some coaches set their starting lineup, and that's who you're going with regardless. A guy goes through a slump, you're going to stick with him type of thing. But other coaches are, what have you done for me? That's just the nature of individual coaches. You see that in any sport. Sometimes a baseball coach has the same lineup for the entire year. Other times he changes it other coach changes it every week game. So it just depends on the personality of the coach in charge.
Mm-hmm.
I like that on the defensive side, because there's some transparency there, and you can tell when you have a situation like a Toa Lobendon who's was clearly struggling, and you get the head coach says he's the love of my life, then okay, he's not being, and who knows, maybe some of the assistants wanted a change, and Clay Helton was like, no, we're going with Toa Lobendon. That could be one of those situations. You see, but I like the transparency. You're following on the board. If I'm a player in there, I'm like, I'm working extra hard at practice because I want to make see that I'm moving up or staying where I am. I like that about that Todd Orlando and the staff is doing that.
Mm-hmm. It also just shows a cohesion on the defensive staff that they're willing to have that input, and also that practice actually matters in that sense.
Yes.
Yeah. We had a question from AKA Boone on YouTube who said, who got the better portal? He's referencing to Gerard's pronunciation of portal. Running back, USC or UCLA?
So obviously UCLA got Zach Charbonnet, the running back from Oaks Christian that went to Michigan and is bouncing back from there, whereas USC gets Keaontay Ingram. Both of these guys have started in college, and I think both of them are really good fits for the offenses they're going to. So I don't think it's necessarily a one or the other, because I don't think that Charbonnet would have fit perfectly with USC. I think, again, it would have been like Marquise Stepp. He's a bigger, heavier back. I don't think that it's a great fit for the style that USC wants to run with the air raid. Whereas I think they're both really good running backs, and I don't think Keaontay Ingram necessarily fits the UCLA style the same way. So I think it just worked out that both of them got really good pickups for both of them.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on the situation?
No, I agree. And sometimes it's like a trade can help both sides. I mean, this is a situation where both programs needed a running back. There were, a guy that had Southern California ties that USC fans were like, hey, you should get him, you should get him. But was it really going to be the right fit? And I think both teams, like Shotgun said, I think you got the back that looks like it'll fit what you're trying to do on offense.
Mm-hmm. Shotgun, Bobby on YouTube wants to know if you think that this upcoming game that USC will have against UCLA is Andy Enfield's most important game of his USC career.
I don't think so. I think that you look back, NCAA tournament games are always more important. So, you look at the Baylor game or you look at the Providence game that they came back, the SMU game that they came back and won. So I think those are more important games there, because they could still lose to UCLA in this game and end up winning the Pac-12 later in the season.
Coley White says, does Mike Bone have any say or have to sign off on support coaches, or does Coach Helton have complete control over that?
I mean, the athletic department pays the salary, so I don't think Clay Helton can just be like, hey, I'm hiring all 14 of you guys. Come on. I mean, if the athletic director gives them a blank check and says, go get whatever you need, then maybe, but I don't think that's what's happening at USC.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're working together, certainly better than what we've seen in the past. It's an athletic department that knows how to hire people, and I think they're involved in a lot of that stuff, at least as sounding boards. And so, you can give advice on, hey, looking at this, where before you wouldn't see like a Lynn Swann, or he wasn't going to get involved in things like that, where this athletic department will, but no one's going to get hired unless Clay Helton's signing off on it. So he's going to have the final say on that. But you get, like you said, Shotgun said, the guys write the checks. They can veto guys too.
Mm-hmm. Mark says, was running power with pulling guards in the air raid a Drevno thing, or is it a Helton thing? Helton has said many times over the years that power is his favorite run play.
I think we'll have that answer next year when we see them on the field, and if they try to run that stuff again. It's difficult to run those type of pulling plays the wider your splits are. So maybe that's why USC was shrinking their splits back a little bit. It's hard to say until we see what they're going to look like this year under Clay McGuire.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it was more of it wasn't necessarily a Clay Helton thing. Maybe there was some support there for what Drevno would do, but Drevno was he was going to be running a different scheme, and we were told that doesn't matter, but I think it obviously did. And I think Tim Drevno can be a great offensive line coach, but you need to have the right offense, and it just seemed to be like apples and oranges. And so I feel like you're going to see a lot less of that, I think. So to me, that would be maybe Clay Helton was involved in it, but because Tim Drevno was there. I don't think if Clay Helton's like, hey, we need to pull, and Clay McGuire is like, no, and Graham is like, no, that I don't think that's going to happen. But it's sort of like you had a guy that's what his bread and butter was. He knew how to block that, but it didn't necessarily fit what the offense they were trying to run.
Mm-hmm. I know we mentioned this a couple of times, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Perry on Facebook says, who's going to be USC's left tackle next season?
Ryan, I'll let you give it your opinion. We went over this on the Family Feud podcast a little bit.
So if I had to bet right now, obviously no portal yet. A portal would be, I think they're still going to look in the portal, but like Shotgun said, with Clay McGuire's got to come in and evaluate. I think Cortland Ford is the guy that's, he's definitely got upside there. I think there was people inside USC that were really excited about him. If you're going to go for somebody young, we got to see him, play a little bit at the end of the season. I think he's going to end up being the starter unless they go to the transfer portal and bring in someone that's an experienced guy that can be an automatic starter like they did with Drew Richmond a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to say because Cortland Ford didn't even practice at left tackle much this year. He was practicing at guard. So Casey Collier was the guy that actually played left tackle with the second team. So is he in front of Cortland Ford? Do you make a move again? Do you say, hey, Elijah Vera Tucker worked out really well. Let's try that again. Let's push out Andrew Voorhees or let's push out Liam Jimmins. Jimmins was the guy I really liked last year. He struggled some this year, but I think that if you give him a full spring and the fall camp, I think that he's going to be able to take another step forward. We've seen him take really big leaps in those camps, which USC obviously didn't have this last year. And all those players, I think, were kind of in that same boat where no one got spring practice. And you were moving basically everyone on that offensive line. Everyone that started was in a different position besides Brett Nealon. So I think that spring ball is going to be really big for this group. So I think those young guys have an opportunity. Jonah Monheim could be in there too, even though I think he's more of an inside interior guy, a mauler that can play a guard position. But that's kind of going to be up to Clay McGuire. What does he really like as in that tackle position, and whose skill set kind of fits that best? Collier, Cortland Ford both have the length and the size to play that position. Collier especially has the height there too. I think Liam Jimmins has the feet to play that position. Andrew Voorhees has played some tackle before. So I think you got 4 candidates there unless you can bring somebody in the portal.
Dennis on Facebook wanted to know, will the safety from Texas, Savion Alford, replace Talanoa Hufanga?
I think that's what you're hoping.
Yeah.
Do they use him in the same way? That will depend on Alford's skill set. I haven't seen him in person, so I can't say. I know Gerard, I think, saw him at the opening, so he could talk about it a little bit better. But does he have the same skill set as Talanoa, where they could move him around as much as they did? Or was Talanoa just kind of, a unicorn, and they used him this way this year, and next year they'll go back to a more traditional usage of the safety? That could be the case. But Alford would probably be the front runner there just to start off with, unless you move Greg Johnson or Max Williams to that other safety spot, because both of those guys have plenty of experience, as well as Isaiah Pullman.
Mm-hmm. Dennis, if you want to check out the Parasail podcast that I did with Gerard, we go in full detail about it. And like Shotgun said, Gerard did see him play in person, so you can get more info on that. Stephen Poway on Facebook wanted to know, any word on Kyle Ford's rehab progress? Will he be 100% by spring, summer, or fall?
I think we did an update last week, right? He was definitely progressing.
Yeah. I heard he would be good to go.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yes. And he posted an update, right, Shotgun?
Yeah, he's posted, running on treadmills and stuff. So he actually went a couple weeks ago and was, maybe not a couple weeks ago, maybe last week, but with one of the local quarterback coaches. They're always looking for receivers. So he went out there and was running some routes and catching the ball, not full speed. And not doing a bunch of cuts or anything, but out there on the field running, which is always a positive sign to see where he will be. I think with spring practice being pushed back to April, that gives him a little bit better chance. Maybe by the end of spring practice, we see him out there, doing some full pad work.
Mm-hmm. Coley White wanted to know, last year, USC had a poor recruiting class. Is 2021 the year it shows on the field, or will it not be a factor due to the senior talent and strong coaching?
Strong coaching, interesting. I would say, I think you're going to start to see it in 2021, but it's going to really have more of an effect in 2022, where you had a 2019 class that was number 20 or something. It wasn't great. Certainly, the worst we had seen at USC in a long time, and then 2020 just sort of fell off a cliff. But there's potential, if you just get a couple of guys that are contributing from that class, that's one. And the second thing is, with the pandemic, you essentially are combining the 2020 and 2021 classes together. And so all of that eligibility is sort of like matched. So it's sort of like it was a godsend for Clay Helton that you could kind of mask this bad class and it won't be as prevalent like going forward, because you basically have these two classes that are merged together and one of them is really good. Now you might be dropping some of those guys, like some of those guys might drop out from 2020 or from anywhere, but it's going to be a huge freshman class from the 2020 and 2021, putting them together. But the fact that USC did sign a small class sort of mitigates that a little bit too. So it was a terrible class, but it might work out with the circumstances around it where you won't have these like lingering effects that you would have normally when you have like top 10, top 10, top 10, 64, top 10 kind of thing.
Give the USC coaching staff credit, because what they're doing right now in the transfer portal, all those guys are kind of slotting in that 2019, 2020 class where you basically have a big vacancy of talent. Mm-hmm. So fitting in a guy like Xavier Alford, who would have been in that class, filling in an Ishmael Softshirt, who I think would be in that class as well, that is adding talent where you basically have a black hole. So that's really important. So it's not like they're grabbing, these guys are graduate seniors that are coming in, graduate transfers coming in as seniors, and they have 1 year, and they're going to be out at the same time of a lot of your other talent. No, they're filling in the hole in between your talented classes. So that's really important. So give them credit for finding, some really big time transfers, but also ones that are kind of filling in at the right, as far as the right class goes, to fit in what you need going forward. So they're helping to mend that bridge a little bit. I think that you'll definitely start seeing it more this year, especially if you have some injuries, because your depth is where you get hit, your talented depth. And this year they could see that after losing, especially on the defensive side, all those talented guys that are going into the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go into rapid fire. We have a couple more questions. Leonard has a similar question. He says, even with a low recruiting class from last year, does USC still have the most talent in the Pac-12 with some seniors choosing to stay?
So we'll find out. The 24/7 Sports, they do that talent composite I think it's in August is when we get that new number. USC was number one in the Pac-12. I think fell out of top 5, but they were ahead of Oregon. Oregon actually might pass USC, but like Shotgun said, it's not just about your recruiting classes. It's about guys that have transferred in the program as well, and they were able to add some high-ranked talent. And it's really just going by the recruiting rankings. I think Oregon might pass USC, but it's going to be close. So it'll be something interesting to watch. But like usually it doesn't come out, I think, until like July or August. I'll find out for sure from 24/7. But it'll be USC and Oregon as far as the talent composite index goes. But does Oregon have enough to pass USC? We'll have to see.
Yeah, Oregon obviously has had the Pac-12's best class the last 2 years, so that's actually obviously going to help boost them up. It kind of just depends on who's left from 4 years ago and 5 years ago that's still on the roster as far as the talent overall. But it's getting much closer as far as that. USC is no longer just head and shoulders above the rest of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Keith on Periscope, didn't forget about you guys, said, why didn't the SEC or other big schools offer Jackson Dart? And why is he the best high school player but not ranked a 5-star?
Yeah, Max Preps named him the player of the year. And that's really about your senior season. It's not necessarily when you're getting a 5-star guy. We go to games all the time, and someone will come up to you and it's like, my son, ran for 1,500 yards and he did this and did that. It's like, well, that's great. You have high school accolades. And that's what they're showing for Jackson Dart and his senior year. But when you're talking about ranking a guy a 5-star, 24/7 Sports is trying to project a first-round draft pick. That's essentially what they're doing. And I think Jackson Dart, if he played like another year, he just kind of came on the scene late. Who knows? Like he had looked like he has the potential to be someone like that. But these are guys that you're projecting as like first-round draft picks for the NFL. So sometimes it's not just like the latecomer; it's like the full body of work. They've seen him in tons of camps and combines and all that stuff. And they put a lot into trying to figure out who's going to be those guys. And so, it's for Jackson Dart. It's just, I think it was, having that one big year, I don't think was enough to project him up into those 5-star rankings.
Mm-hmm. Shotgun?
So part of the reason why he didn't have the offers that maybe you would expect out of a guy who put up the numbers was Max Press Player of the Year is because of the pandemic. schools couldn't come and visit. Schools weren't allowed, coaches were not allowed to go watch games and stuff in person. So you're looking at tape. How many also quarterbacks are the first position to commit in classes the majority of the time. Just on average, your quarterbacks are oftentimes making commitments 2 years in advance because then you want them to be the leader of the class. So a lot of SEC schools have already filled up their classes. Georgia just they flipped a kid from South Carolina for 2 years from now. So that's their quarterback for the future, basically. But Jackson Dart, a late bloomer, didn't come on until his senior year, blew up this year, showed not only the arm strength and the throws he can make, but also the running ability. So we saw him last year in Orange County at an Under Armour event. He didn't necessarily stand out. Miller Moss was there, and Jake Garcia and some of those guys that USC was going after, they stood out a lot more than he did. So he's made some big strides in his game. And that happens with 17-year-olds. So, he made some big strides, and normally that would get him on the radar of a bunch of other schools. They probably, if they need a quarterback, they'd probably be coming and looking at him. And for USC, it worked out. They needed a second quarterback after Jake Garcia decommitted. But for Dart, unfortunate for him, he didn't get a ton of offers, but he got USC, so he got what he needed. He had some suitors at the end, and it worked out that he ends up being Max Press Player of the Year as well. Because also you can win. It's easier to win awards when not everybody in the country's playing too.
That helps. Shotgun, it's rapid fire. Just a friendly reminder.
Sorry,
Rapid
my
fire.
bad.
No, you're good. Matt has a question for you, Ryan, on YouTube. He says, "Hey Ryan, Coach Harrell said that there's always an open competition for positions. Do you really think that is the case? Jackson Dart could really change the dynamic of the offense, especially in the run game."
Yeah, that's bull. That's not like Keaton Slovis is a starter. So you coaches say that, but Jackson Dart could cut me, and I don't know what he would have to do. Even you saw a guy like Sam Darnold come in and just was like, wow, it's pretty amazing. And it took, 3 games for him to be, the fourth game is whatever he's named the starter. The offense would really have to struggle again. And Jackson Dart would just have to be crushing it in practice. And then maybe they would make some sort of move similar to what we saw with Sam Darnold. But no, Keaton Slovis is the guy. They've invested a lot in him. Graham Harrell knows what he can do. I'm not saying he's going to make excuses for him. He performed at record levels for a freshman. So, yeah, I think there'll be a competition, but, barring some sort of miracle, like Keaton Slovis is going to be your starting quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Kevin on YouTube said, will next year's offense underperform or will the defense overperform? Which is more likely? So offense underperforming, defense overperforming.
I want to be optimistic and say the offense gets on track this year to where we would kind of expect it. I think you'll see the year 2 jump that we were expecting this year, next year, especially if you run the ball. And I think the defense was good this year, and I think they'll continue to be good if they can fill in those vacancies. There's some big holes to fill.
And I think you've raised the bar for the defense because they did play better this year, and you like the staff. And you might have lowered the bar a little on the offense because the bar was pretty high after Keaton's freshman year, and thinking the sophomore campaign is going to be like just gangbusters, and it just wasn't as exciting as you would have liked in a weird year. So yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. I think the defense makes more strides and gets even a little bit better.
Ryan, since I've dubbed you the Pac-12 guru, I'm directing this question to you. Coley says, which Pac-12 team do you feel will be the least formidable coming into the fall of 2021? Cal? Question mark? Oregon State? Question mark?
The least?
My answer.
Who would you say?
Arizona. They just don't have talent.
Arizona's got a lack of talent. I like Jed Fish. I think he's going to do some good things, but there's a lot, like the video I saw today, there's going to be a lot of that, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of wins. They're on a 12-game losing streak that probably is going to continue. Oregon State can beat teams. They're on an upward trajectory. Like Cal is good. They lose Tim DeRuyter. He goes over to Oregon. That'll be an interesting, fit up there. Arizona, I like the direction they're going. I feel like they're going to go in the right direction, but it's going to take a little while. Now, I thought the same thing would happen with Washington State and Colorado, and they won some games, with new staffs and everything. But I feel like they had better pieces in place. I mean, Colorado, like Colorado still has Mustafa Johnson and Katie Nixon, and they had a bunch of guys that were like dudes. You're like, okay, so they can play. I think Herb Edwards had that when he came into Arizona State. I just don't think you have that in Arizona. Even like Rankinell's out, and so I agree with Shotgun. I think, unfortunately, the 12-game losing streak is probably going to be added to in 2021 for Arizona.
Shoddy, what's your take?
Arizona.
Oh, right. Sorry. Reading comments over here. Jose on YouTube wanted to know, can you imagine USC losing the first game to San Jose State? No pun intended, since his name is Jose.
They're legit team.
I say this to my roommate all the time. She's like, can you imagine? I can imagine a lot of things. Yeah, I can imagine it.
Sure.
What was it, Star Wars thing? Like when Han Solo, they were like trying to convince him to go after Princess Leia. It was like this, more wealth than you can imagine. He goes, I can imagine a lot. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, San Jose State is coming off their most successful season in program history. Their head coach did not leave and take a new job. So, yeah, they built some positive things there. So it should be a challenge for USC to start off the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think it will be a challenge for sure. I mean, and, I don't think they're going to lose to San Jose State, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. That's like a legit team.
Yeah, and a team that USC rescheduled or got on the schedule rather than UC Davis. So there you go. Mark Watkins want to know, will Raleek Brown is set to announce his commitment on Friday. Is he Oklahoma bound, or does USC actually have a shot?
I haven't seen that he's committing on Friday. If that's the case, then Oklahoma is probably the favorite right there. But if he's committing this early, don't expect that to be the final say in his recruitment. I expect him to be, if he commits early, I think his recruitment will still be a topic of conversation leading possibly all the way to December, but definitely into the fall.
Hey, real quick, you guys. Thinking about this, you mentioned it was a rescheduled game, the San Jose State game. They would have played UC Davis. What if USC loses to San Jose State? Is there going to be like, what the hell is Mike Bohn doing? We had an easy win, and they put this undefeated team on the schedule. Like, is that going to be a thing?
Yes, because
the AD doesn't get blamed if you lose to San Jose State.
The AD shouldn't be blamed.
No,
but
he should
fans
not.
will blame anything and everyone.
No,
that's what happens.
It's not the AD's fault if you lose to San Jose State. Go take care of business on the field.
Yes,
you're USC. Act like it.
Yes, that's the right answer. But he's asking, will he get blamed?
No.
Yes.
It's going to be coach's fault for sure.
Well, everyone knows that Clay Helton will be blamed, but I do think the AD will still be blamed. Ryan, what do you think?
Yes, obviously it's not Mike Bohn's fault. He saved this tradition, They came in and saved the tradition. They did the right thing. They scheduled who they could schedule. There wasn't a lot of choices. You didn't know San Jose State was going to, go gangbusters and their coach is going to be like the, top prospect in the country or whatever, one of them. So, yeah, I mean, it's better for USC. This is a more legit game. You're playing a team. When they played Western Michigan a couple years ago, they had won 10 games the year before or something. So that's better. Like, you'd rather see a team like that than UC Davis. But, yeah, you can't blame Bohn. But they'll be mad at Bohn for one, scheduling that. But then also, why is Clay Helton head coach? He just lost to San Jose State. So there'll be a lot.
They'll be so infuriated at Helton that they won't be able to think about being angry at anyone else, I don't think.
No.
But this, like you said, San Jose State, that could be a positive for USC because if they then have another successful season in the Mountain West, then that should be, look good on USC's resume as the season progresses. Western Michigan was a little bit different because PJ Fleck had been the coach there and he had just taken the job in Minnesota, I believe.
Yeah.
A couple more questions and then we'll wrap this puppy up. PF on Facebook said, is USC going after the linebacker from Tennessee, Henry To'oto'oto? I always say that wrong. I apologize. Of the transfer portal.
I believe you said it correctly, but yes, they are. They're one of the leaders there, and if he decides that he wants to play closer to home, then USC is probably the front runner then.
Yeah, and that's the guy like we talked about. Are you taking a flyer on a 3-star running back, or get this proven guy who's now in the transfer portal and he's coming from a dumpster fire program? You could potentially get him on your team and help him start right away.
And again, fills in the middle of those classes where you struggled at. So another potential to add a talented depth in a recruiting class that you struggled in previously.
Andy on YouTube says, which receiver will have a breakout season next year, Kyle Ford or Brew McCoy?
I don't really like this question because I think Brew McCoy already broke out.
Which game?
I mean, this season. He had over, 400 yards, I think it was, and he had multiple touchdowns. So I think that's a breakout as a freshman.
Yeah, it's tough to
I think
compare.
a better question is Kyle Ford or Gary Bryant, maybe? Or one of the young guys that are coming in.
Brew had 200 yards, 236.
Close to 400. We'll count it.
Rounded
It
up.
would have been 400 in a regular season.
Sure.
I think Kyle Ford's going to do some big things. So as long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to have we've seen Brew, maybe, limited. We've seen him. I think you're going to see some good things from Ford.
Mm-hmm. Oh, two more questions. I lied. Tony says, did USC make a mistake by choosing Keaton Slovis over JT Daniels?
Oh,
I know,
my gosh.
I know.
I hate this question. We get it way too often.
I know.
They didn't make a choice. JT Daniels got hurt. There was never an open competition. They said, hey, let's see who wins this battle. By the time that JT Daniels transferred, there had been one practice. And then there was a pandemic, so there was no competition there. So it's not like they chose anyone. Yeah. Keaton Slovis was a starter. JT Daniels said, I'd rather go over here to Georgia where I have a chance to win a national championship rather than being in a potential competition with a guy in the fall. And, hey, am I going to fall too far behind this guy? Whereas Georgia, there was an open competition from Jake Fromm leaving, and there were 3 or 4 different guys there. So it wasn't a USC choice. JT Daniels chose to transfer to Georgia, and it's worked out perfectly for him. Georgia should have put him in the starting lineup sooner, and maybe they would have been in the college football playoff as well.
Yeah, anything short of JT, you can go out there and play in crutches. Otherwise, I don't think that was going to happen. He didn't choose. He never got to really compete after, Keaton Slovis had a great year. He kind of saw the writing on the wall and transferred out. So it's not like he lost. He left.
Mm-hmm. One final question, and it's from Mark. He wants to know, will there be tunnel vision next Sunday because of the Super Bowl? No.
Yeah, we decided, executive decision, we're just going to go do whatever you're going to do, sit on your couch, have a few beers, enjoy the Super Bowl. We're not going to tunnel vision. We won't bother with you next week. So we'll, if there was more signing day stuff going on, we could do a Thursday show or something. But we'll have a bunch of stuff after signing day. But no, we won't do a live show. We'll do 2 weeks from now. So February, whatever that is, the 14th or something. Is that what it is?
Let's see very quickly. Yes, Valentine's Day. Hey,
Valentine's Day television.
Get your date and watch television. Sounds like a great time, right?
Yeah, especially you're not going to be able to go out to restaurants anyways in Southern California. You might as well just get some takeout and enjoy tunnel vision. And
such great entertainment for a date. That's what I'll say. Alrighty, gentlemen.
Any final thoughts? After that, if you take your date to tunnel vision, I'm guessing you're not going to have many more dates with that same person.
You never know. What if they're a huge USC fan? You can be like, I pay attention, and here you go. I'm just kidding. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, before we wrap this thing up?
I'm excited for television Valentine's Day now. I'm just I'm going to skip the Super Bowl and just go Valentine's Day television. I love it.
Sure, there you go. Kind of sad, but
make sure you guys are watching the 24/7 Sports Recruiting National Signing Day show when Rajon Davis is making his announcement. I think it's 9 a.m. Keely, is that correct? 8 a.m.
I believe.
8 a.m.
8:30?
Pacific.
Early.
We'll have it on the message board. Make sure you check out the message board as well. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe so you can check out the War Room and find out who that wide receiver is. That's no longer a wide receiver.
There you go. All right, that's going to wrap it up. That is Ryan. That is Shotgun. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all in 2 weeks.